A lot of people want to know, what are the French doing in North America in the first place? Because we in American history are used to North America being a place where there are English-speaking people and also Amerindians. So what are the French doing there? And that's a good question. And this question goes all the way back to shortly after Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492 and thought he discovered not some islands on the Caribbean, which he did not expect to find because he did not know they were there, but he of course thought he found some islands off the coast of Japan. And even after he died and had been back to visit these islands 4 times, he was still convinced that he had found Japan, and everyone kept on saying, no, you have not found Japan, you have found something completely different, and he didn't believe that. But anyway, there was still a search for the China Sea, which is that many Europeans thought that if they sailed far enough west, eventually they would hit China. And when America, the American subcontinent, was initially rediscovered by Europeans, they had no idea how big it was. And so I have a handy map here, which you can find on Wikicommons, so you can use it for any kind of purpose. It's on the public domain. And we all see how big North America is, but in the beginning of the 16th century, very end of the 15th century, they had no idea if it's just a little strip of land, and behind this little strip of land is the China Sea. They didn't know that if you followed some of these waterways far enough, if you would get to the Pacific Ocean. They had no idea. So in the 16th century, in 1524, Francis I of France, I kind of call him the Renaissance king in France, hired an Italian named Giovanni Veranzo to sail around this new landform and see if he could find the China Sea. And Giovanni sailed into the Cape of Fear in North Carolina, and he saw enough waterways that penetrated far enough into the land to think, hey, this might actually lead to the China Sea. And so the French continued to send explorers to go look for the China Sea. And while they never found that, what they did find was lots of cod, which I know sounds very exciting, and of course beaver. And cod is very important because, and they found lots of cod fishing up in the northern regions of North America and in the waters there, because of course Europe is a largely Catholic continent. In Catholicism during those times, during Lent, you did not eat meat, you ate fish. And so it was a very profitable business to catch cod, to put them in giant salt barrels, and then ship them back to Europe. And many months later, people would eat it for Lent. And that sounds very tasty, but it did keep the French interest in North America. And as I mentioned, the French also found beaver pelts there, and beaver hats had just become the latest must-have in Europe. And when you think of a beaver hat, it's not like a Davy Crockett hat with the raccoon sitting on his head, but they use the beaver pelt, which is a beautiful, smooth, shiny pelt to make and what we see today are like beaver top hats. And of course, back then they had different shaped hats, but that pelt was very important for making those kinds of hats and things. So the French were able to make a very profitable trade by hunting the beaver. Now there are many explorers, French explorers in North America who did many important things, and you can actually research those if you want to, if you follow one of the links below the YouTube video that you're watching right now. And one of the links is to a wonderful site about Louisiana, which is another another area of America that France had settled. They weren't just in Canada, they were down in Louisiana as well. And so there's a wonderful site that talks about the explorers who founded Louisiana and when the cities were established, and they have interesting biographies of those explorers and some fantastic maps. Also, there's a link below me to a map from the 16th century, and it shows kind of the Labrador area as it was drawn by a French cartographer. And it's fascinating because you can see sea monsters, you can see demons dancing around in this new world, and it shows images of Native Americans fishing and hunting and dancing. And it's a really interesting picture to look at as you understand what the French initially thought of this new landmass. But the other explorer I want to make sure I mention is, of course, Champlain. And Champlain was in North America, and he was able to establish a relationship with the Iroquois and the Huron in 1608. And this is important because now France didn't just have economic ties in North America, they also had a certain kind of diplomatic tie. And it also starts to explain how the settlement pattern for the French in North America was different than the English. Because if you look at the way the English settled in North America, they really wanted to create New England, or Little England in North America. They didn't want anything to do with the Amerindians that were there, except maybe a little bit of trading. They wanted cities that looked like English cities. They wanted dances that were English dances. They really wanted to have England, but just an ocean away. The French, on the other hand, had a very different settlement pattern. And because the French are focused very much on beaver and fishing, and because they're making these diplomatic ties with the Iroquois and the Huron and other Amerindian nations in North America. They are settling over a much wider expanse of land, and they're also using, and they have to use, information and techniques and alliances that the Amerindians have been using. So what they do is they cover a much larger piece of land, and again, you can see this on this lovely map where it's colored on the coast to be English settlements, and it's colored deep. You can see all the way, it's kind of like an upside down triangle, all the way from Upper Canada, down, down, down until the Gulf of Mexico. And they covered this wide piece of land so they could get more beaver, make more settlements, and things like that. So you see a very different settlement pattern. And eventually, the French are really coming to North America for one of 4 reasons. One is they're looking for the China Sea, which eventually they give up and they stop looking for, because North America obviously has many other riches besides being maybe close to China. 2, the French are there as Catholic missionaries, because the French take on Amerindians in North America initially was not that these are savage or barbaric peoples necessarily, but that they are wild. They haven't been tamed yet. They are this wild type of man who has not yet been affected by society. So when missionaries would come, they would not only try to convert some of the Amerindians to Catholicism, they would try to domesticate, that's their word, they would try to domesticate these wild men. And not necessarily make them French, because they could never be French, but to try to make them more self-controlled, not as violent, make them good Christians. And so you see missionaries, French missionaries, a lot in North America. The other reason why you would see the French in North America is because they are into that beaver trade, or they're trying to make some kind of trade in North America. And the French who came to North America and stayed and continued to stay for generations became French Canadians. And French Canadians, because they were so enveloped in the fabric of life with the Amerindians in North America, and because they were so accustomed to the landscape and they were so accustomed to earning their living in North America, they stopped resembling the French and kind of became their own kind of person. And the 4th reason why you see the French in North America is to come to America quickly, look around, establish some kind of business, and then escape to France as quickly as you could. Because there was a very common belief through beginning from the discovery of America, or rediscovery of America until the middle of the 18th century, that if you stayed in America too long, the air and the water and the plants there and the atmosphere would actually make you depreciate and evolve, and eventually you would turn into a sauvage, you would turn into a wild man, like the Amerindians. And so, French people, fresh from Paris, right off the boat, would step into America and they'd see the Canadians and think, oh no, if I stay here, that will be me. And I will no longer be French, I will start to be a sauvage, I will start to be a wild person. And so they would establish their business and run back to France as quickly as possible. So you never saw the kind of settlement pattern in New France that you got with New England. So, and this is what the French are doing in North America.